Hey everybody, Susan Finch, your host today for CRM Radio. And I am excited as always because I just wake up excited generally. My guest today is Matthew Nolan. And Matt is a Senior Director of Product Marketing. This is the longest title, Matt. Senior Director
of Product title, Susan. The best title, but I'll go with that.
It won't fit on a t-shirt or a card. Okay, here we go. Deep breath. Matt is the Senior Director of Product Marketing for Marketing AI and Decision Sciences at Pega. And
that is a lot.
Matt, man, that's a lot. And that sounds like you do so much. So marketing is your expertise. It's your sweet spot. So let's start there and then go into the other aspects of Pega, and you can tell us on why yours is the best tool. And what we all know is marketing is key to empowering sales. That knowledge and data, it has to be of value to sales before they can engage with the prospect, existing customers, potential advocates. So I want to brag about Pega a little bit. You guys give sales teams and agents the tools to adapt to any situation. Real-time, next best action recommendations, anticipate customer intent, and come up with the perfect offer. And I know that sounds like pie in the sky to a lot of people. or other people might say, oh, yeah, ours does that. No, it doesn't. Pega does that. You guys don't do that. And so with that, I want to lead into the product itself. I want to talk about the benefits and how it can benefit sales teams directly, if you don't mind jumping into that.
Absolutely. So let me put it this way. So think about it. Salespeople today are at this huge disadvantage, right? So the average company that's out there with a marketing department and everything uses tons of different channels, and a lot of them are digital, right? And those create thousands of different signals. So human beings, right, salespeople don't have the capacity to process all that information by themselves. We've tried to forever, but it's gotten harder and harder and harder the more ways that we can touch customers. So when a salesperson is face-to-face with a customer, they can thin slice a person and have a conversation exceptionally well, like far better than an AI can, honestly. But what they can't do at scale for an entire book of business is look across hundreds or thousands of potential people and customers and prospects and constantly read and react to all those signals and all that data, right? So the benefit a salesperson really gets from the AI is it can read that data and score it and determine propensities and tell you exactly who's in the market for something right now and what that person is actually interested in. Then that person can use their own personal subject matter expertise, their intuition, like their charisma, if you will, to engage them. It's this kind of powerful combination of a human and machine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Because you hit it exactly what it is. I'm great in conversations. I can react to things, but what I'm not able to always do is draw from not only what I have experienced, but to have the power of what everybody else has experienced, that cumulative experience to whittle it down and say, well, this is really what's about to happen here. And let's avoid that pitfall and let's redirect and let's do this.
Well, exactly. You're kind of converting. You're converting the individual experiences which make up some customer's experience, which can be with lots of different people and lots of different channels and lots of different tools, and you're converting it from individual to almost like organizational knowledge, right? That you can then mine and make sure that wherever that person is having that experience, it's consistent and that they're ultimately getting great value from the people they're talking to. If you can do that, I think that your AI is doing a fantastic job. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think what you've just managed to do as well, this has been for 10 years since AI has really been in conversations. The biggest fear is, oh, it's going to replace salespeople. Oh, it's going to replace marketing. And to be able to say, no, it's here to make you more effective, valuable, and successful. Stop being afraid of it and being so paranoid. If you're good at what you do and you're coachable.
Which is a big part of it. It's really about, in a lot of ways, people don't buy from machines, from systems. They buy from people, right? Or they buy, and I think the best way to express a concept and to get people to buy into an identity of a product and themselves is with a human being, right? And salespeople are wonderful at that, and people are geared that way. But what we can do is arm them with information, arm them to whittle down that search and get them in front of the right people at the right time, talking about the right things. If you can do that, that's 90% of the battle, right? And that's usually the goal.
So then let's get into some of these specifics, because I also want to cover something, as we know, that's coming and has already started to emerge, and that's third-party cookies disappearing.
Yeah.
And
so go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, for those listeners that you have not been paying attention, with all the privacy issues and things, there has been the movement to eliminate third-party cookies, especially when it benefits somebody other than Google. And companies who relied on that method as their only way to engage and gather data are in full puddle-inducing sweats to switch to plan B. And you've already done that. Can you talk about that before we move on?
Sure. So I think what people are struggling with is the idea that for years and years, the digital ecosystem, the ad ecosystem, has used third-party data primarily, right? And they got that from collecting it from browsers and from understanding where people have visited and what kind of things they're looking at. And when Google basically deprecates the cookie, what they're really saying is, we're not going to give you access to that third-party information anymore. So the tools that we've used, things like data management platforms and a lot of different audiences, become kind of moot in a way, right? They become something you can't use anymore because that third-party information goes away. So what brands are faced with, and what I talk to people about every day, is how do I shift from a third-party focus to a first-party focus? And AI is really the way that people are going to get there. What they're really going to do is take the information, Susan, that they collect from their website and from their mobile experiences, where they have first-party relationships with people and they're talking to them in places where they're doing their banking and places where they're, where they're calling and who they're talking with. They're going to take that information and use it to drive the types of advertisements that are still going to be relevant to people, right? And in a lot of cases, much more relevant, because third-party cookies never really worked that well. It was always kind of blinded and everything. But in a first-party way, what they'll do is work with platforms like Facebook, like Google, but lots of, anybody who's a third party or who's an advertiser or publisher will eventually allow you to use your own AI to feed them information about what to show people and be able to update it very, very rapidly. And that's what we're doing right now. It's basically paid media management, if you will. What we do is take a look at all the things that you've done with the brand and then score you and say, what's relevant to Susan right now? What are the things that she's looked at, that she cares about, that she wants to see? And then make sure to surface those on the platforms that you use every day, right? And those platforms are so fast now that they can take data literally in seconds you could have a conversation with an agent in a call center and say, you know what? I love that offer, but I'm just not ready for that. So instead of going to Facebook, you go to Facebook 10 seconds later or 10 minutes later, instead of seeing that same ad, which you probably would have before, instead it's going to switch to something else that's more relevant to you because you've already said that's not where I'm going, right? That's not what I'm interested in. And I think that kind of rapid adaptation is what people are going to get used to eventually. It's going to take a little while. Like that switch from third party is going to hurt people for a little bit, right? They have to figure out what to do and how to operationalize all this. But all of the, if you will, the infrastructure to do this is there, and AI is the way that people are going to attack that problem, I'm pretty sure.
Well, what's interesting too, and I did an episode on security and things a long time ago, that data isn't truth, but it's sold as truth. And I think about the conversations I have around the dinner table with my family, and we'll randomly look up something super bizarre, but we're really not interested in it. And suddenly, and we'll dare each other, no, you look it up. No, you look it up. I don't want those cookies. Because you don't want to be associated with certain things that we look up and ask. Like incognito can't even save you from something.
That's a way, but you think about it. If you've ever dropped a pair of green shoes into a basket on Zappos and it follows you around the internet for the next 90 days, that's the kind of thing you've been dealing with for years and years, right?
Or if I talk to a friend, people put on the COVID-20 and they took off the pounds and stuff. All of a sudden, got on this weight loss stuff and moo-moos and things showing up on Facebook on the sidebars. And like, oh my gosh, there's all a bunch of ugly clothes. And all I do is mention it. The scariest part of that, though, that I'm going to be happy, maybe it'll start to disappear more, maybe not. I promise you, when I'm talking in here, and it affects my search, that's super spooky. So to lock it back down to something that's more my permission given, I want to follow you guys and giving you my permission to use my information to make my experience better is a whole lot different than I was eavesdropping on you and everything that you did. And now I'm going to make assumptions and just force you and cram it at you and shove everything at you with a shovel, hoping that you'll take a bite.
Wow, that's the way we look at it, Susan. We think about it in terms of you can have permission to talk to somebody, right? And you have to gain that, you have a first party relationship with them. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean you should talk, right? There's a lot of cases where, honestly, what we say is this, is if you don't have something relevant to say, you're much better off over the long term not saying anything at all. So we've actually built most of our software that way, right? What we actually do is we look at it and we say, look, what does Susan have a propensity to look at? Is she in a good place, right? Is she happy? If she's not, let's try to solve her problem first. Like if you're having a hard time, say you're a bank and you're having a hard time with your credit card, or you just got declined someplace, let's solve that problem before we try to sell you anything, always. but also like, are you in pain? Like, is there some sort of churn issue that's going on? Are you looking up the terms and conditions on your card to see if you can cancel? Because if you are, let's solve that before we try to sell anything. Selling should always be a last resort kind of issue. So we look at it from a relevance perspective. If we have something relevant to sell you and there's no other problems going on, and it's saved like a 40% chance of accepting this, which is actually pretty good for a normal marketer or for a salesperson, then let's show it to you. Awesome. Let's give you the opportunity. But if not, let's just sit back, and maybe it's better to say, to offer up some information, right? Or attempt to educate a customer as opposed to trying to sell them something, right? Because I think what you do is you have to earn the right to the next conversation. And if you're in your type of situation, right? Say I go onto Amazon, right? And I drop a ladder in my cart, and all of a sudden I'm retargeted with ladders. I'm not a ladder aficionado. I'm not going to invest in ladders, but ultimately a smart AI should be able to look at that situation and say, you know what? I can offer him something once or twice. If it doesn't take, then let's not push the issue, right? Let's actually try to help rather than sell. And I think that's where, with most of my customers, that's what I really see them doing, is looking at, I want to develop a more long-term, sustainable type of relationship with the people I do business with. And you do that by offering value outside of just offers. It has to be a bigger type of conversation, right? Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. But that's a perfect lead in to where I want to go after our break. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, everybody. This is Susan Finch. I'm the host today for CRM Radio, and Matt Nolan is my guest. So let's take a quick break. Pegasystems is the leader in cloud software for customer engagement and operational excellence. If you've driven a car, used a credit card, called a company for service, opened an account, flown a plane, submitted a claim, or performed countless other everyday tasks, chances are you've already interacted with Pega. For the past 30 years, their technology, CRM, digital process automation, robotics, AI, and more has empowered the world's leading companies to achieve breakthrough results. Learn more at Pega.com. That's Pega.com. And I'm back here with my guest, Matt. I want to continue this conversation, and we started to talk to the personal experience, and I was struck with an analogy. Now, I'm going to avoid any baseball references because you are the expert, and I will step all over myself trying to be clever with a sports metaphor. So I'll talk about food because I like food.
Oh, I do too. So I think we're good going there.
Okay, good. So I'm thinking about restaurants. And a restaurant, when you sit down at the table, when we can sit down at tables, we order. But before we order, they tell us the specials of the day.
Yeah.
And the specials are what they want us to know about, what they would like us to bite on. And the question is, am I being served potato soup that's really special and $3 more from the leftover potatoes from yesterday? Or am I getting something that's of value? So it's a special, but is it a special for the customer? What does it do for them? So that takes me into your product. Who is the special for? What you are doing? Is it for management primarily, for the salesperson, the end customer?
That's an excellent question. I'd say this. I think any relationship that an organization has with a customer has to be a mutual relationship, right? It has to be a joint relationship, or it's not sustainable, right? If you consistently try to put offers or sell to your customers and you don't support your product and you don't listen to their needs, you'll lose them. But vice versa, if you consistently talk to a customer about specific things and they don't buy it, right, that's their choice at the end of the day. It doesn't mean you have to keep doing that. So I think most of the time we look at it in terms of, I want to make sure that I'm connecting with you and I'm developing a rapport one way or another. I think most marketers, most salespeople, you realize you have to have that in order for any kind of sale, any kind of commerce to take place. But what you have to do is you make sure that you're introducing non-sales type messages on a regular basis, right? And that could be, I look at it this way. There's organizations that we work with out there that are big banks like Commonwealth Bank of Australia. When you walk into the bank and it's your birthday, they tell you happy birthday. If there's something that's gone on, you just recently purchased a home, they thank you for doing it. And they thank you for your business and for the mortgage. They ask you how it's going. They attempt to make it personal, right? But some organizations say, I'm not going to say anything unless there's something relevant to say. But I think in the case of somebody like a sales or somebody like a waiter that comes to your table that's actually going to offer you the specials, I actually like that because it gives me an opportunity to see new things, right? But maybe you don't have to show me all 100 specials, right? How about you just talk to me about the top 1 or 2 or 3 things and bring them to my attention? So that's what a lot of people go through with things like acquisition, right? In marketing. It's the idea that you still have to advertise because you don't know people real well up front, right? But after you tell them a few things, you kind of see what they're interested in, make it a conversation, then talk to them. You can kind of whittle down and figure out what their interests really are. Now, people in a restaurant don't get that opportunity a lot of times, right? A waiter doesn't see a customer every day. But when you do, and you have regulars, you can develop a real rapport with people. And I think that's what we're ultimately trying to do, is make it a relationship-based thing, both the business benefits, because you're earning that right to the next conversation and that person's commerce. But the person benefits too, because they're getting a level of service and an experience that really means something to them. To me, that's important.
It is. So that leads me to where I want to get more specific towards salespeople. One of the things that salespeople hate hearing is we're getting a new, and you're going to learn the new, fill in the blanks, and their eyes roll and they sigh and they already put up those roadblocks. No, when they're digging their heels in, I don't want to do it. I don't want something new. I used to use this and I'm used to that, and that's more work. I want to know, how does your AI product benefit the salesperson themselves?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of different ways too. So let me say this first and foremost. It depends on the type of salesperson, right? There are lots of salespeople that work in a business to consumer type of environment. And to us, in a lot of cases, that's where AI is really good right now, right? Because those sales cycles are very short in comparison to like a B2B type of situation where you have lots of different buyers and influencers and lots of different people that can say yes or no. AI is still not as good at that. I don't care where you are, where you're coming from. It's the truth across the board. There isn't a great B2B AI that's great with sales yet. We're getting there in a lot of cases. We can help, but it's not as precise, right? But I'd say that an AI with salespeople, what it ultimately does, in a couple of different ways. First, when you're actually, if you think about the beginning of a salesperson's day or their week, what happens is you pull a list, right? You ultimately say, these are the people that I'm going to talk to one way or another. I'm going to make it a point to speak to all these individuals. AI can massively help right there. So if you think of a salesperson with a big book of business, say it's even more than 100 people, that's really hard to manage one way or another. You struggle with that. There's lots of lists and there's spreadsheets and there's notes and there's sales automation systems, right? But what if instead that AI could actually listen to the customers, because the customers give off digital signals everywhere they go. They touch your brand in a million different ways. They use their credit cards. They use their mobile devices, right? What if your AI could actually react to those signals and hold up its hand and say, you know what, right now is the time to talk to Susan. And you were going to talk to Matt, but instead let's deprioritize that because Matt seems like he's cooled off a little bit. He's not in a good place. So instead, let's prioritize the people you really should talk to. That gives a salesperson a massive advantage when they go to talk to people, because if somebody's ready and actively listening, that's something every salesperson would want. But I think it can also help them because what you can do is you can guide them in that conversation. Here's the type of things that people want to talk about, right? Like Susan, like I was talking about earlier, I'm not a ladder aficionado, but the fact that I've purchased a ladder, and a lot of times has a lot of implication in the types of things that I like and the types of things that I'm interested in, right? So what the AI can actually do is recommend sort of like a next best action or a next best offer for a person, and ultimately say, here's the thing to show Matt right now. But if this interaction was to happen tomorrow, if you're going to call him tomorrow, the answer might be different. The AI can constantly read and score your list and tell you who to prioritize, but also what to talk to them about right now because of what they've seen and what they've said, maybe what they clicked on the website. And that's what you see with a lot of organizations is you're letting that person prioritize and make the most of those particular conversations.
So that handles the next couple of things I was going to ask you about. It's like,
I'm sorry, that's what I do.
No, that's perfect. I love it. No, that's okay. Does it help them schedule their calling? Yes, you just said that because suddenly we are reprioritizing. What can Matt do with a ladder that we have? Well, Matt can clean his gutters. We sell gutter cleaners, and that's perfect.
Or there might even be you might want to reach out to them and deliver a message that's non-sales, right? That just say, whether it's happy birthday or congratulations or something about one of their kids going to college. That's something an AI can really help you do that's hard for people to remember. As salespeople, we used to do that with notes in books, like, in our address books, right? But now you can do it in an organizational way so that everybody kind of knows it and everybody can benefit from it. There's significant value there.
Yeah, but I'll run across little piles sometimes of business cards with blank backs that are just so littered with notes. Crazy notes with the sharpest pen you can find to be able to write down every little detail about the person.
Every tiny thing. And the fact that you were doing that in your head at the time, because then you take those and you take them back with you to your office and they'd sit there for the longest time, maybe get translated into some sort of automation system, but usually it's just a note in a spreadsheet or it's just on the card, right? But what you can do with that now, like what AI is really getting good at, is then even if you were going to do that, because I'm on the trade show floor a lot, I'm a marketing guy, right? So I'm on a trade show floor a lot. So I take a ton of notes about people, but actually being able to transcript some of what I'm writing and then actually use NLP to figure out what it is and how to interpret it, and then putting it in a sales automation system for me automatically, that is powerful, right? So it's taking that old salesperson experience, the place where we were on our own, and making it more like, let's give you some tools that can actually help you do your job better. I think AI has gotten a lot better in that regard. It still has a long way to go, but I think it's gotten much better than where it was. Is that fair?
It is. Salespeople usually have a better skill at remembering things than most people because they practice and they flex that muscle all the time.
Yeah.
But if you're so focused trying to retain it all the times, you're missing what's coming at you right now.
I would agree with that.
That helps to avoid that. Yeah. So how does Pega help with forecasting?
So this is still a little nascent, right? So ultimately, a good AI can project that sales are going to convert, and it can calculate revenue conversion, right? An awful lot of times. And that works great, like I said, in B2C type of markets, because those sales cycles are really, really small, right? And because you know that, you talk to a certain amount of people and you have things like standard conversion rates and that everybody kind of relies on for forecasting. It gets trickier, though, when you get into enterprise type of things where you have these big deals with all this, trying to figure out whether a deal in a mid stage is going to convert in 12 months or 18 months is still difficult. So I'd say this, where AI has gotten really good is when a deal is close to fruition, right? When there's something that's coming up relatively quickly, the forecasting capabilities are awesome. Like whether somebody's going to convert it or not works really well. It's the farther out you get, Susan, that it gets hard. And I think any kind of AI, any kind of math struggles with that, because so many things can change in the interim. But what you'll see in most sales automation like systems like what Pega does now is an awful lot of, hey, I've got a particular opportunity open. Here's the players that I have. And the AI is looking at ultimately the engagement of those players. And then as you move through specific sales stages, it starts to make recommendations about when you're going to close and what the likelihood of close is going to be. And that works pretty well. But like I said, it gets trickier when it gets farther out there. In the bigger the enterprise, sometimes it's harder because when there are 50 people making a decision, it's far more difficult than when there's 100 or when there's 5 or 1 or 2, something like that.
Well, as we're getting close to the end of this visit, I want to get into the other piece of it, that these systems, yes, it's for sales, yes, it's for the customer. Let's talk about management.
Sure.
How does this help management manage their pipelines better?
Well, I'll say this. You can focus more. If you think of a typical sales manager, a lot of what you're doing is making sure that your people in the right place at the right time, right? Ultimately, you're getting people into the field and making sure that they have the tools they need to do their jobs. So a big part of that used to be making sure that people were talking to the right folks. And I think so being able to prioritize leads and being able to then ultimately prioritize actions, right? And be able to say, these are the people you should talk to. And here's the types of things that you should do, absolutely helps sales managers, because then they can focus on making sure that those salespeople, like you said, learning a new product can be terribly painful for a lot of people, especially if you've been selling in a market for a while. But they can focus on enabling them there rather than the other aspects of what they're doing. They can focus on making sure those people have the product knowledge that they need and that they've been ramped up and kind of educated on how to actually convert those particular deals. But it also helps management from a projection standpoint. I'd say this. While Wall Street loves and while companies love to be able to project 12 months in the future and say how we're going to do, the American system, a lot of the world is built on a quarter by quarter type of basis, right? So a quarter isn't a terribly long period of time. You can predict with some amount of accuracy how many deals are going to close, how many you're going to be in, how many opportunities you're going to touch. And I think the AI can help a manager do that very effectively, right? If it gets out past a quarter, it gets harder, but they can absolutely prioritize within a quarter, within a short period of time. And that can be very useful because there's nothing worse than missing a quarterly projection or just knowing that if you just converted X, Y, or Z more, that you could have hit a number. And I think that's what's going to help sales managers is just being able to put some like an analytic rationality around where you have your people spend their time, and then just make sure that they have the knowledge they need to actually do their jobs. It becomes a simpler profession that way, I think.
That fits with AI across the board, though. With you guys, tell me why you over somebody else.
I'll tell you this. So what we do that makes Pega completely and utterly unique, right? I've been in the analytics and the marketing business for 25 years, Susan, and this is something I came to Pega because we can do this. So what Pega does is in real time, not beforehand, not like a day before, an hour before, even a minute before, but when Susan comes to the website or comes to the mobile app, or when we're about to send you an email, right? We look at you and we look at all the 50 or 100 or 1,000 different things that we could say to you, and we score them all through models right there at that moment. We look at all the different things you could do and say, what's Susan's propensity to do this? And sometimes that's a sales offer, right? But a lot of other times it's a different type of message. It's a nurture type of communications. It's educational. It's a retention type of communication. That's something the market doesn't do well at this point. The market's been built to push out messages in a mass kind of way, right? In big batches. That's what marketing automation was built to do. Pega is built to look at a person and say, what's right for this person right now? And then ask itself, is it right to talk to this person right now? Because a lot of times the answer is no. So instead of constantly chasing people who aren't ready to respond and training them to ignore you, what we do instead is make sure that everything that we send to you is relevant, right? Because if you're relevant, you earn the right to the next response and the next response and the next response. If you can stay, relevance is everything. In Pega, because we do this in real time, we're probably is more relevant than anything else. What people say a lot of times is customers who use our tools say, I can increase my response rates by a factor of 5, right? If I was a 2% responder on an email before, I go to 10. If I was a 10% conversion, I can get up over 30, right? Like it's a massive jump because it's real time and because it's relevant. And I didn't want to go on and on about Pega, but that's why I came here. I've never seen a company that could do that put the capacity and the investment in analytics to do that stuff in real time. We'd always done it kind of, if you will, overnight. I have 30 million people in my database. I'm going to score them all for a single product, and I'm going to send out something in the morning. But what we really do is very, very different. It's right there in the moment. And that makes kind of all the difference, if you will, because all that data is always current. That makes sense?
But that's one of the things that you do for the salesperson that I have to say, it makes them of more value. Pega enables them to easily set up that automated routing directly through that sales op portal that you have, or that app studio thing
absolutely.
you guys have. And it makes it so much simpler where they don't miss anything. They aren't missing any opportunity or clue of what should or shouldn't happen. It's like, oh, crud, missed that detail. Their dog just died.
Yep.
You don't want to miss.
That's the worst situation for a salesperson, right? And it's so hard to avoid that, you know? It really is. Like, there's nothing worse than being sold. Like, there was one time when I was actually trying to refinance a mortgage, right? And a guy calls me back, and what comes down to is that I'd already declined the offer they gave me, makes the same offer to me again. It's a terrible type of situation. There are times where somebody calls me about a mortgage and I already have a mortgage with their bank. That's happened to me multiple times. And you're like, oh, and the salesperson's like, oh, I'm embarrassed. This is a horrible situation. But if you can put that person, if you can make it easier for this person to get the information in a timely manner and actually just make sure that they're covered when they make a call, that makes all the difference. It really does. You kind of put them in a position to succeed as opposed to just trying to avoid potential pitfalls. And I think that's a big difference.
And that doesn't account, though, for when all your data gets sold to another company and they pick up the part over, and that's a whole different thing. You have to talk about.
That's happened to me more than enough times.
I have people. It's like, don't you see the notes that you were on a "I hate your guts" call list? Do not ever call me again. Did I not tell you that? I told you that like 4 times. Never, ever, ever, ever call me again because your company let me down so horribly. And then it gets sold to somebody else. They pick it up and try and do the same thing. It's like, oh my gosh. Huh. That's another conversation you and I should have later.
I agree.
But today we are going to wrap this up. Matt, give me a call to action. Where do you want to send people? How can they connect with you? How can they learn more about Pega other than going to pega.com? What else do you want them to do?
You know, I'd say this. What I think is interesting is that if you're out there and you're in a CRM type of role, whether it's sales or it's marketing or it's service, you really need to educate yourself on the idea of real time, right? Of what it really means to get information not from days ago or from weeks ago, but from like 3 or 4 seconds ago across all these different channels. If you're not thinking real time, you're kind of falling behind where people are going. Because I think a lot of times that there's organizations that are out there, sometimes they're big financial services companies, sometimes it's tech, sometimes it's communications, but that are kind of leading indicators of where the market's going. And that's what people are investing in right now, is the idea of a real-time type of experience for my customer. If you're not educating yourself around that, I think you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So I'd say whether it's going to pega.com/marketing or whether it's going out there and literally just trying to find information from Forrester about what real time, because Forrester is an excellent source for real-time information. Either way, educate yourself around this topic, and I think you'll get a lot of benefit from it. If not from now, then even a year or two from now, when this becomes much more of the status quo as opposed to something nascent.
Terrific, Matt. Thank you so much for being a guest today. You brought some wonderful insights, maybe set some people's mind at ease too, about not fearing AI and embracing it as a way to do their jobs better and more successfully and being the hero to their clients.
Well, hopefully. And thank you, Susan. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. And folks, thank you. I appreciate everybody listening.
Thank you.